Well, I'm Joe Mount. I'm a junior theater and religion double major here at Wabash College, and I'm playing Macbeth in next week's production, opening on February 26th. The character Macbeth is a crazy individual, and in this adaptation of it, I've kind of looked at some of like Frank Underwood, who's kind of the contemporary-ish Macbeth from House of Cards, the Netflix series. But just that he's this man who's driven by desperate ambition, and he wants to be king, and he sees that to be king is within his grasp. Witches come and they tell him that you're going to be king, and it seems that everything is leading to this. So he's driven by this desire and this passion, and it ends up breaking him because he kind of gets to the point where he looks at what he's done, and he's murdered his cousin who was the king, and he's murdered off his best friend, and he's killed all these people, and his wife is sitting there, and she's going at him and trying to get him to do this and be a better man and all this sort of stuff. So he's a very kind of tragic, I would kind of almost say hero, in the fact that by the end, despite everything, the fate lining up against him, he says, "Fine, come what may, I'll do it," and he kind of takes it in on himself and becomes kind of an individual, a hero, I think, even though he's kind of a bad guy, which is awesome. One of the most challenging things about doing Macbeth is how crazy he gets. I mean, that's something I've never really had the chance to do, is start at a sane kind of cool person. I mean, he comes and he's defeated the enemies of the country, and he's done all these things in the name of the king, and he's a good guy, who then devolves into madness, and he sees things, and he goes crazy, and he turns on his friends, and it's very strange to do. And Macbeth, I think, is also a lot more mature of a character than I've ever had to do before. He's a grown man intent on murder and treason and all these sorts of crazy things. And he's this kind of cold, calculating, manipulative, violent person. And so that kind of getting into that mindset as well has been very strange and challenging, but interesting and a lot of fun once you get into it. Kind of looking for where the inspiration for my Macbeth came from. I had read Macbeth in high school once or twice. I had never done a Shakespeare show before, and then coming here, and this is my first Shakespeare. Going into the character, I really didn't want to look at any other Shakespeare. I had seen Sir Patrick Stewart and Sir Ian McKellen do their monologues in classes. But other than that, I hadn't really watched a Shakespeare. Like I said earlier, I kind of looked at Frank Underwood from House of Cards as kind of a contemporary Macbeth character. But other than that, I mean, it's kind of all just been exploring the character and myself, trying to stay as true to my interpretation as I can without bringing somebody else into it. So Elise Lockwood is playing Lady Macbeth in this production, and she and I have worked together before. We did Picasso at the La Panagio, also directed by Dr. Cherry here last year, I think. But yeah, she and I were very cool with each other. During that show, we joked around, so we kind of had that relationship from before. And then now with this, it's just been a lot of fun taking a very serious, at times very intimate, at times very funny, at times very violent relationship with this person. And she and I, from day one, in auditions, when she read for Lady Macbeth and I read for Macbeth, she said, "Okay, I'm going to touch you, and you're okay with that?" And I said, "Yes, absolutely, I am. That's fine." And we've just kind of got into it and got really kind of thrown ourselves into the roles, and it's been a lot of fun to work with it. The relationship between the characters Macbeth and Lady Macbeth is dynamic. Um, there's a very strange kind of give and take that goes on between the two, where she pushes him to be better than he is, and better not in the sense of good or bad, but better than as in something more. Um, and he shares everything with her. He's completely reliant upon her, and she's completely reliant upon him. Um, and it's not until, where he kind of pulls away from Lady Macbeth that things start going crazy, and things really mess up for him. And you have the tomorrow and the tomorrow and the tomorrow speech. Is just the big monologue that everybody knows from Macbeth. Right before that, the opening of that monologue is that after he learns that the queen has died, he says she should have died hereafter. There would have been time for such a word. So you kind of see that even at the end, when Macbeth has gone crazy and Macbeth has kind of jumped off the deep end, he still loves Lady Macbeth no matter what. That she was his kind of guide or his touchstone in reality. The fighting has been very new, something to learn. That we brought in a fight choreographer who kind of explained going through the process of, we're using knives, and so she explained the psychology of a knife fight. And so, pulling that, kind of trying to bring in the psychology of, if you're using a knife, you don't care if you live or die. It's very, very intimate. A lot of chances to get cut, to get hurt, to bleed. And so kind of trying to transfer that idea to actually doing it on stage has required a lot of work and a lot of repetition, a lot of going over fights. We go at half speed, so it's 50% in slow motion, just getting the basic movements down, and then we go through, and as we progress, we work on sound variants and different moments of realization of winning and realization of losing, which is living and dying in this case. And so it's been, other than the workout, like of getting out of breath and just covered in sweat by the end of, especially the fight between Macbeth and Macduff and the big climax ending of the show. It's been hard, but it's been a lot of fun, getting bruises and, making mistakes and getting cut across knuckles or bashing a 8-pound Bowie knife at somebody's side. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun. The tomorrow speech, the monologue there is a very interesting thing to do. I think especially for me as an individual, portraying Macbeth at this point, who he and I mean, there's some existential thought that's definitely in Macbeth, and that's definitely in this monologue especially. In that sense, Macbeth and I kind of share similar viewpoints on the world, where his is very dark. I have other ideas, but so going through that is Macbeth and I kind of feel very similar. I mean, getting lost in the character, or is it just that you and the character happen to share a similar idea? But doing it is a lot of fun because, Macbeth as an individual has just learned that his wife has died, and that's what prompts this entire speech of the world as a walking shadow. This world doesn't mean anything. It's a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. And so kind of going and bringing that emotion of he's just lost his wife, he's suffering a terrible, terrible loss, and then going through and kind of, there's a certain irony to the monologue, and to bring in the irony as well. It almost feels like the great cosmic joke. It's life is a candle. It's a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. So it almost feels like it's either kind of a dark comedy, or it's a little bitter comedy or something, to bring that in as well. So it's fun, and it's finding that balance between the two and being able to portray those emotions, and that's the challenge that comes with it. But it's It's rewarding. If I can pull it off right, which we'll find out.